So what's going on, guys? Welcome back to Carrasco Ranch. My name is Robert. If this is your first time tuning in. So in this video, we're going to go ahead and talk about how I got the pond to where it is today. This is a video that was requested by a viewer, so we're going to go ahead and answer that today. I have some other products that I'm going to be talking about today that are going to be in the description. So if anyone is interested or needing some of the products that I use here on the pond, everything will be down in the description below, so you can check it out, read over it, and see if it's something that you may need for your pond. So starting off when I bought the property, this was a cattle ranch. So it was cattle, it was stepped over all over. It was pretty much just run off into like a little holding pond, but it was obviously not this deep, not this nice. And it was only about probably less than half the size it is today. It was overgrown. So I would walk in there. When I would walk in there, some of the brush and grasses and all that were taller than me. Had I walked in there, you wouldn't be able to see me with all the grass and all that was grown in there, the trees and all that good stuff. But like I said, anytime you have cattle in and around a pond, they're so heavy and they have to go and drink water that they just smush down all the banks and they start to erode the pond or the tank. So that was the first step, was just pretty much cleaning out the pond and making sure we don't go too deep where we take out all that clay either. The clay is what retains the water and prevents as much water loss as possible. You're still going to have water loss due to the sun, especially here in Texas. The heat is still going to evaporate some of that water, but leaving some of that clay will help reduce the amount of water that is absorbed through the soil. So yeah, first thing, we went ahead and dug it all out. From the island this way, it was, I guess, part of the pond, but I guess it was so many years that it was, I guess, neglected. So it was pretty much just like a little, I don't even know how to call it. It was maybe 6 inches lower than where I'm standing at today, but it was just full of just brush and just random stuff. You can tell it may have held water at some point, but it was just so far gone that I needed a lot of work. So we had to dig out about 4 to 5 feet here from the pond, from the island this way. And then on the other side of the island, same thing. We just dug it out to, I think, around 6 feet. Right now it's about 6-7 feet deep, and the water's still about 2 feet low. I usually keep it 2 feet low in case you get some heavy rains. It's not going to overflow the tank or anything like that. But when it is at 100% capacity, usually about 8 feet, 9 feet is where the water is going to be at. So I'm going to go over some of the problems that I ran into kind of early on whenever I started doing the tank. The first one is that the water is so clear. So the problem with the water being so clear, you would think that's a great thing, but it's not, especially here in Texas, South Texas, because we have a lot of sun. So since the water was so clear, after we dug it out, we'd put water in there, but it would get a lot of like fungus and algae and just little grasses growing in the pond. So that was an issue, that was a problem. We had to kill off a lot of it. Some of it is good for some of the bait fish. They can hide and they can eat off of the leaves and stuff like that, whatever grows on the leaves. But too much of it takes out too much oxygen out of the water, and it eliminates how many fish you can put in the pond. Once that plant matter starts to die off, it starts to remove oxygen from the pond, which can start leading to a fish kill. So it became a problem. I'll leave it down below. It's an algicide that you put into the water. That's what we did to basically just eliminate everything that was in there and start fresh. I'll leave it down below as well. But with that thing, you want to be really careful not to overdo it. You can definitely kill your fish if you aren't careful. And I would recommend doing it in sections, because if you kill off everything in there and you already have fish in there, that's where I ran into an issue, is that I killed off everything at one time. You're going to start depleting the oxygen out of that tank too dang fast. You're going to kill some of those fish. So I would recommend doing it in sections. Kill off a section of grasses, give it a little bit of time, kill off another section, because all that dead matter is going to end up depleting the oxygen in your pond. And if you have fish already in there, it may kill your fish. So, but like I said, it does work. It works fantastic in my opinion. Actually, probably too good, if I'm being honest. But anyways. So yeah, first thing was just preparing the pond. I have some test strips that I use to basically just check the levels of the water, just to make sure it was healthy enough for fish and things like that. So basically, after we already started all over, I went ahead and bought all the testing equipment for testing the water myself, because it is going to cost some money if you hire somebody, but a lot of these tests you can actually do yourself. I'll leave all the stuff, all the equipment down below. It's fairly inexpensive considering how much they're going to charge you to come out here and do this for you. So yeah, everything will be down below. But yeah, so just basically checking the water, making sure that it was viable for fish, since we were basically starting over. And so yeah, everything checked out. Took a little while. The algicide takes at least a week or two to kind of deplete out of the water system, and then you can kind of start bringing in fish slowly and slowly. So one of the first things we did do was bring in bait fish first and kind of let them kind of develop their own little, I guess, ecosystem where they wanted to hide out, stay, and breed and all that good stuff. Once we had a good little ecosystem of bait fish, then we started bringing in the bigger fish, the predator fish. And so those were thrown in after the bait fish were already established, I guess you could say. The next thing is going to be, after you have the fish in there, to kind of do this organically, to maintain the algae and the weeds that grow in there, you're going to want to put tilapia in there, grass carp. Grass carp are going to require a permit from Texas Parks and Wildlife. You can go into the Texas Parks and Wildlife website, fill out a form, and they're going to send you a little permit, and they're going to give you a number of carp that you can actually go out and purchase. The fisheries are not going to give you the fish without getting that permit first, so keep that in mind. But yeah, so tilapia, grass carp are the two main ones that I know of personally that will help maintain a pond naturally. You're still gonna have to help them out, but that'll help reduce the amount of chemicals you have to be putting out into the water. This is something that's gonna be working all the time. The fish are gonna be working all the time because they have to eat. That's how they live, is eating all that green matter that grows in there, and it reduces the amount of work you have to do. So yeah, so the carp are going to be usually eating the grasses that are rooted into the soil, usually along the banks or even along the island for me. The tilapia are typically going to be eating the floating green grasses that grow, the floating algae that grows. At night, you usually hear them, and it's usually the tilapia. That's what they're doing. They're just eating all that green matter that's floating. They do a really good job. They really do. But sometimes you do need help, or they need help, and that's when I buy this stuff. I get the stuff off of Amazon. By the way, you want to keep kind of this stuff on hand, because sometimes it'll be a day or two, maybe even a week before I come out here and look at this pond, and maybe I see, oh, okay, maybe there's some algae growing in the corner. I'll go and take care of it. But if you are not visiting the pond on a regular basis, it's a good idea to have it handy so you can go take care of it right away before it becomes a problem. Because once it becomes a problem, you really got to be a little bit more scientific on your approach on how you're going to take care of it, because you don't want to overdo it, and especially if you already have fish in there, because then you end up killing everything. So it's best just to have it on hand. That's what I do. I have a gallon of this, I have a gallon of the algae side, and if anything comes up, I can take care of it the same day or the next day. Because sometimes with this stuff, it's not available through Prime. About 90% of the time it is, but that 10% of the time, it's that's when usually things happen. It's when you can't get it fast enough. So keep that in mind. But yeah, anyway, so that stuff, what it does is it blocks out, which is this, is just dye for the pond. And all it does is just blocks out the sunlight from reaching the bottom of the soil. So what that does, it eliminates the amount of grasses and algae that will grow from the bottom up. It doesn't allow the sunlight to reach the bottom. It kind of creates like I don't know how to explain this. It kind of creates like a little cover for the pond so the sunlight doesn't get down to the bottom of the tank, or the pond, or the well. Or the pond, or the tank. So yeah, those are pretty much the two chemicals that I use for managing the tank, and it takes very little management once you get it established. It's from the time where you're starting it to establishing it that it takes a lot of work, and you're gonna have to be taking care of the chemicals in the water, making sure that it has good oxygen, dyeing it a little more regularly, algicide more regularly. Once you get it established and you have the proper fish in there, it'll usually for the most part take care of itself. I have to dye the tank a handful of times a year, to be honest with you. The algicide maybe once a year, and it's very little. It's kind of like spot sprays. It's not a whole lot. Yeah, and one thing that I am going to kind of note here is that when we dug out the new section of the pond from the island this way, we did it to where it dropped off. The reason we did it to where it dropped off, so basically like from right here, I'm going to show you guys right here. Right here, it's about a 4.5 foot drop off. The reason we did it like that is so that way the plants and seaweed or grasses and all that wouldn't grow. Because if you usually you have a runoff like this, you have a pond that runs off this way. If you just have a pond where it just drops off and it gets real deep, it's hard for that sunlight to reach the bottom of that soil, especially if I'm dyeing it. And it eliminates all that grass that would typically grow along the banks. So that's what we did. We kind of just made it really sharp drop-offs around the edges. The only place that it kind of slants a little bit is towards the back, but even then it kind of drops off a little bit. So eliminates a lot of the maintenance that it takes to take care of all the grasses that grow along the banks. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much going to be it. Pretty much the fish will take care of it. Every now and then you will need to dye the water, maybe even add a little bit of chemical to remove some of the algae that is built up inside. But for the most part, it's pretty simple. Just the initial part that's kind of the hardest part of the job, but other than that, it's pretty self-explanatory. It takes care of itself, and it's very low maintenance in my opinion. So that's one thing I am going to mention, guys, is when you are going to be digging it out, that you don't remove too much clay. And if you are going to dig it out, you can buy clay and put basically a clay layer. You can bring it in on a truck and put a clay layer on the base of your pond. They also make pond liners for anyone who wants pond liners, but don't go too deep where you take out all that clay, because then you're gonna have a lot of water that's gonna go deep into the soil, and you're just, it's gonna basically evaporate into the soil is what it's gonna do. What else? If you have a pond that's also in a really windy area, when the water is being moved around by the wind, you're gonna have typically more evaporation. So when we have like a couple days that are really windy, I can see that the water has gone down a little bit more than it typically would. It's not a drastic amount, but you can tell it's a little difference. It's because I'm always paying attention to it. But yeah, so just keep that in mind wherever you plan on placing your pond. If you're placing it in an area where it's gonna have a lot of wind, it's typically gonna need more water a little more regularly. What else? Yeah, main thing is just making sure you have good clay. And if you don't have good clay, bring clay in, dig deeper than you have to, put the layer of clay in there, and hopefully you did it correctly and you will have less water loss going down into the soil. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much going to wrap it up. I hope that was helpful, informational. Like I said, everything that I talked about today will be in the description, along with the tools and equipment to test the water when you're getting this thing ready. Or if you have a pond already and it's not up to par, all the equipment that I talked about today will be down below to help you get it up to par. But yeah, alrighty guys, until next time, be careful, be good, take care, and God bless. See you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.